Hello and welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we are going to be taking a look at season 2 of Arcane, the long-awaited sequel to season 1, which premiered in 2021. And this was a season that you have been chatting up a storm about, Lee, because you have been excited about this ever since they made the announcement. So season 2 came and went, and sadly, this was the final season of the show, which was an adaptation of League of Legends. Um, and I gotta say, like when I watched the episodes, I was expecting it to be a continuation of what we saw in season 1, which was critically acclaimed, and which I think is safe to say you and I both enjoyed, but it just left me with more questions than answers. So why don't you go ahead and take us into, Arcane season 2?
Yeah, and I would definitely agree with your sentiment there. I think that was overall my biggest gripe with the show. But yes, I just try to get through what we got in front of us, right? So, very much similar to how they did season 1, right? We had 9 episodes, and each one was kind of done in 3 separate acts. So, I'm gonna kind of try to break things down act by episode by episode, just to kind of go through some of the highlights. And we'll kind of get some thoughts on some of the characters as we go through it. And I'm glad that you mentioned season 1, because I was a tremendous fan of the first season. I thought it was fantastic. I love the characters, the animation, the music. There was just so much I thoroughly enjoyed with it, and I think they do capture that in the second season. But there are some parts of it that were left me wondering why there wasn't more seasons. So we can kind of help talk about that. So first episode, right? It starts off. It's literally right after the aftermath of the cliffhanger we got in season 1, where we see Jinx shooting the missile, going towards the council. And we kind of see kind of the aftermath of this, where we have some very significant changes. We see a bunch of the council members were killed. This is also including Caitlyn's mother, who's going to play, obviously, a very important role in Caitlyn's kind of thought process. And Victor is critically injured, so we have Jace kind of running him off for him to utilize the Hex Core in an effort to save him. So we have this kind of post-attack, I guess, situation where we have the remaining council people, right, for Piltover, are kind of divided on what they want to do. And I think this is where the show still shows how it could do such a good job of balancing all these characters and all the unique things that they're thinking about that kind of shape their decision making. So we have Ambessa, right? She's clearly using Counselor Salo for kind of her own political ambition here. We have Caitlyn, who obviously has such a strong personal connection with the attack because her mom was killed, of all people. So she has this idea of revenge, but I also like how she still remains somewhat level-headed, because she acknowledges that it's not like all of Zion that is doing it. It is just this one individual, and that is Jinx. And then on the other side, we have Mel, who kind of talks about the power vacuum that Silco being dead is kind of leaving for everybody, and the fact that if Piltover was to send a whole bunch of people to the Undercity, it might cause them to be kind of reunified with their hatred towards the top city. And she also has this other thing where she's thinking about Jason not wanting to use Hex Tech for kind of notorious or villainous reasons. And there was just so much packed into that scene. And I just wanted to see, what did you kind of think about how they're able to kind of depict all these kind of different characters with all these different motivations into this one scene?
I mean, I will say this. I mean, it is nice to see them pick up where season one left off, but in the grand scheme of things, once you get to the last episode, you kind of realize it's become more of a bait and switch. Um, it, it, the way I see it, it's sort of like how the book of Boba Fett sort of started off, being about Boba Fett, and it eventually morphed into another season of The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, because I think out of all the storylines that were packed into season two, I think that particular storyline was the strongest, and I think they should have just ran with that, for the 9 episode run. Um, I, I mean, I think it's kind of tragic, just because just how much they were able to get from character development in season one. And I feel like what they did with the characters going forward, it just took them into whole new plot threads that made no sense and didn't best represent them. Jace, I'm really disappointed in, because he started off as a sort of wonder kid who had a lot of potential, and who, really cared about what he was doing in developing the hex tech, even though he had some, hesitations about, about its moral implications. But by the end, he becomes this sort of crazed madman who's like running around with the hammer, smashing people, in the head, because of some weird vision or trip he took to the future. So there's a part of me that feels a little bit embittered about it, because you're taking really, really good characters and sort of turning them to shadows of themselves instead of developing them even further. I mean, I don't know what else to say, but about that. I think the only character who showed any, was of any interest really was Vi, really. But even then, Vi comes off as sort of like this sort of big angry lesbian who's like mad at the world, and just feels like her only way to find consolation is to just punch everything. It seems like a lot of her targets are men, weirdly. I don't know if you noticed that at all.
I didn't really pick up on that. I guess there could be some interesting subtext there, but not something I would say was overly popping up in my brain.
I mean, it's not. I mean, maybe it's nothing, but I kind of feel like what they did in season two was just try to pack so much into it. It just became a parody of season one rather than a continuation or a fulfillment of what began, in the first season. But that's just me.
Yeah, fair enough. And I will say we'll definitely touch more on the characters, because I agree with you, and I think there's going to be some very clear, interesting character discussions to have at certain key points in the story, because to your point, there definitely is a fair bit of I don't know how many to quantify that as, but there's definitely some character motivations that were confusing to me, and I think some plot threads that we'll talk about later as well that were equally as confusing, if not almost totally swept under the rug or barely got into. But yeah, I will say, regardless, right? I did enjoy seeing some of the like really strong, at least character moments in some of these earlier scenes, where it gives an opportunity to see kind of like how complex everything is. I feel like we're not trying to dumb everything down to something very simple. There's a lot of clear things there, but maybe got a little too heady for its own benefit. So we kind of have this memorial service that happens for the fallen counselors, and we see that we have this attack once again, and obviously a very highly public situation where you're at someone's funeral, and you have people from Zon that are attacking the people of Piltover, and you could see that they're pretty much being overwhelmed, and that's Piltover, right? That's being overwhelmed. And we kind of have this really kind of badass moment where Ambessa, with her team, is able to kind of dispatch them and help the Piltover enforcers that are struggling with the enemy. We have that meeting at the very end of the episode, and I like how Nell very, very smartly kind of deduces that the only reason that all these like machines and everything were bought up were probably because someone on the surface was helping them. So I thought that was a very nice touch, because I think Nell is always kind of been this kind of smart character, and her obviously being Ambessa's daughter. I think Ambessa knows how to play the political scheme very well. So it's good to see her character still kind of showing that kind of cleverness. So yeah, what are you kind of just your quick thoughts on the first episode? Because I just after the big long wait, how did the first episode kind of strike you as you watched it?
Well, see, I thought they were going, they were going for that storyline of there's going to be a civil war or a war between Piltover and Zahn, right?
Yes, 100% agree.
Because that's what it was. Because that's what it was, building up to in season 1, and then Jinx launches her attack, and she strikes the first blow, and then what you see, in episode 1 of season 2, you're thinking, oh, okay, so I know how the story's going to play out. Again, it's just that bait and switch that's going on here, and I really hate that they did that, because I thought that would have been a far more promising, far more interesting storyline than simply deciding to take a leaf out of Marvel's playbook and do the whole multiverse thing.
Well, wait, we will talk about the multiverse. I want you to hold on to that the best you can, because I want to talk about that when we kind of get more about that in the later episodes.
Well, that's one of many, because also the Black Rose thing confused me as well, because I scoured.
Okay, thank you.
I scoured season 1. I did not see any hint of it, so that
there
are just so many things that just really make me scratch my head.
Yes.
I'll say this: I'm a bit disappointed with the whole Jinx, as the figurehead or leader of the rebellion, because they started off with this idea that she's going to be the one who unites all of Zahn, and they did go with that storyline for a bit, but then it just petered out at the end. And by episode 8 or 9, you're like, hey, do you guys remember that storyline where Jinx was supposed to lead you guys into a new future? Whatever happened to that?
Yeah.
And it just fizzled out to the point where they're just like, what story are you talking about? We have no idea what you mean. I mean, we're busy focusing on the fact that Victor has pretty much gone, Thanos on everybody. So
yes, yeah, there's definitely some interesting plot threads that unfortunately I don't think really got the screen time they were deserving, and I think that's a perfect segue for the second episode, because a lot of this I felt like should not have been a part of it, because kind of in hindsight, as you're watching it the first time, you're not thinking too much about it, but as you kind of see how everything unravels, I felt like the second episode was probably one of those that had the least usefulness to the overall story, because to your point, right, we have Jinx, so she this is where we meet the character of Isha, right? Who kind of plays, I would say, a important role in kind of shaping Jinx's personality.
Yeah, she's kind of like a mirror of Powder, really.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that is an excellent call, and I totally agree. I think that it was a very, I think they knew what they were doing when they did that. And we have her meet Isha as we're kind of seeing this power vacuum that's happened after the death of Silco, and we see Savika, who's trying to help kind of keep everything together, but doesn't have, I think, the same leadership skills that Silco had. And we see kind of some of the moving parts that kind of play a bigger role in the overall story, where we have it kind of transitions over to Victor, who awakens from his time in the Hex Core. And we kind of see his, body has now been modified by everything that's going on. And this is where Victor and Jace kind of have this, kind of discussion about the use of Hex Tech or the Hex Core or the Hex Gates, whatever Hex-related thing you want to talk about. And this is causing them and their friendship to ultimately fracture. And it's so interesting because watching the first time, you don't know that this is pretty much, I would say, the whole crux of the second season is the relationship between Victor and Jace and how everything happens, where almost everything else is a secondary thing. So I know we talked about a little bit, but were you also taken back by the fact that really the second season was more of a discussion about Victor and Jace, as opposed to the relationships we see with Vi and Jinx or Powder, depending on who you want to phrase it as?
Yeah, I think they should have just let Victor die. That would have been far more impactful because what they did to Victor, it's kind of like that quote from The Dark Knight. You either die hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Because Victor was a very sympathetic character in season one, and you can sort of empathize and appreciate where he was coming from because given that he was disabled and given the limitations that he had to endure, you could understand his motivations for what he for his work with the Hex Core. So when you see him in season two, where he's sort of become this messianic figure, he kind of morphs
He's
later on to
Jesus.
something. Yeah, he morphs into something that's far more destructive later on. You begin to wonder, like, what was the point of all of that? Because to your point, I mean, yeah, I mean, episode two was pointless, but the whole character development of Victor, throughout season two is also pointless as well because it didn't add anything to the storyline overall, and frankly, it was very much unnecessary.
I
Also,
agree.
because
Yeah, I think a different direction would have done a lot better
that's what
for.
I'm saying. I think had he died as a result, I think what would have been far more impactful was that Jace kind of descends into the sort of grief to where he begins to become more and more power hungry, and I also feel like what they did with Caitlyn, where they kind of manipulated her and used her as the instrument of Piltover's enforcement as part of the whole covert coup d'etat that Mbessa was enacting. I thought that should have been used to Jace because Jace would have been far more impactful because this is the guy who knows how to construct and manipulate hex core. So
Yes,
I feel like had they taken the character manipulation that they used on Caitlyn and applied it to Jace, that would have been far more impactful because they could have used Victor's death as the reason for him kind of going crazy and Piltover becoming a military state, which would have accelerated, the whole conflict between Piltover and Zod. But
yes,
again, it's a missed opportunity. I kept banging the table as I was watching. I kept thinking, Caitlyn is just not that strong enough of a character to be manipulated.
agreed. Yeah, I think this is where, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that because that was absolutely something I was thinking about too the whole time. Was this was a big missed opportunity for I think the character that had the most impact on how that was all going to be happening, which is Jace, because Caitlyn, was never really.
Because Caitlin's a soldier. I mean,
Yes,
I mean, nothing against soldiers, but soldiers, you know, can be manipulated pretty easily. What I'm saying is, it would have been far more tragic if you had taken someone like Jace, who is very, who in season one is very calm, very collected, very measured. If you use Victor's death as sort of the springboard for his descent into grief, that would have been far more impactful. Kind of
yeah,
like, again, to use the Dark Knight reference, it's kind of like how the Joker turned Harvey Dent into a crazed vigilante going around killing everybody. That was far more impactful because we know the potential that Harvey Dent has. If we had taken something like that, I think Jace could have been the villain of season two, who would have had a very far more I guess, for lack of a better word, far more rewarding, story arc where he goes from, someone who's grief stricken to the villain to, finally, redeeming himself at the end. I think that would have been far more impactful. Would have at least, brought an end to the whole, Arcane saga much better than what
yes,
we
the
would
book.
get. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I totally agree, and I think that's something that we see a lot of, right? Is that we have so many characters, and I feel like they're just trying to have everyone play too much of a role when there was certain characters that needed the extra screen time, that was missed, and I
Or
think
characters who shouldn't have been there at all. I'm just saying.
yeah, exactly, right? Because I think about, like, for instance, right, we have Echo, right, and I'm gonna talk about him a little bit here because, like, he obviously plays a huge factor at the end, but really he doesn't have that much significance throughout much of the story, right? Like
Yeah,
we
because
see him.
he really doesn't bring anything to the table,
Yeah,
really.
yeah, agreed, right? And like I said, this is not a slight against his character. I really liked him, and I think like his whole battle with Jinx and everything was so well done and put together. But I think too, if you wanted to do more with this character, you had to do more. You had to give him more screen time, and I felt like it was extremely lacking because really you have Echo and Heimerdinger, right? who kind of are like, they kind of notice like there's something wrong with this tree and it has like the corruption on it. So they're like, okay, we're gonna break into the labs, and this is where they kind of meet Jace, and this is what kind of takes them on their own little story, because they kind of get thrown into, and I'm going to say multiverse for now, right? I want to save that for the episode 7 when we get there. But they kind of throw them out there into this episode, or when they throw them into this multiverse, and they're kind of, we don't see a lot of them for a good chunk of that second act. And I think that that's a shame. But one thing that absolutely stuck out to me is just how good, like, just the visuals are. Like, it was so, like, them being like transferred into that like multiverse. Just seeing how all that was happening was just so visually impressive. And I like how that's happening as we're having this battle between Vi and Jinx, and Caitlyn and Savika are all kind of squaring off in this fight. And I like how all that's kind of happening at the same time. The music is really good, and this is, like, to me, what Arcane had the ability to do if they just kind of maybe put the focus on some other aspects of it, because we see this like really cool sequence where you have Vi fighting Jinx, and it looks like Vi's about to punch out Jinx or kill her, whatever we want to say is going to be happening there. And Isha comes up and she like puts herself on the line, and I like how like taken back Vi looks as she's like this. She's just like, oh my gosh, like, I always talk about Jinx kind of having this monstrous intent, and now you're almost thinking to yourself like, hey, like, who's the monster now? Like, having this little girl go out of her way to help protect her is such a big thing. But then you also see on the flip side, right? You see like Caitlyn's, kind of bloodthirst to, kill Jinx, and, kind of having that quarrel where Caitlyn kind of recognizes like, hey, this isn't right. Like, you can't put, other people in jeopardy for your own, like, kind of personal squabble. And just to kind of see all that, I thought was super impressive. So as much as, we're going to talk a lot about the story and how it kind of misses the mark in a good bit of places, this definitely reminded me of how strong of a show it could be. Looking at just the excellent visuals and just the soundtrack, which I think is really something that is superb. So what did you think about that?
I mean, it's a pity that that's the exception and not the rule, really.
Yes.
I mean, it was far more patchy in season 2 than it was in season 1.
Agreed. Yeah.
I mean, not to mention the fact that Caitlyn comes off far worse than everybody else in the series, because you would think someone who suffered a loss like that would kind of try to find a way to be measured, but to your point, she becomes a sort of crazy character who just has a hair trigger and just has to go and shoot everybody because that's her way of grieving. I did find I will say this, I do think it's interesting that Isha kind of sees herself as like Jinx's protector in a weird way, because even though Jinx is supposed to be, well, I'll say this, air quotes, look after Isha, it's actually Isha who's kind of looking after her, because she's sort of Jinx's anchor into reality, because we know she pretty much has this propensity for kind of going off and losing herself in the moment. There's like this one scene where she's talking to an empty chair and she's like, oh, so you're giving me the cold shoulder too. Obviously it's an allusion to her chatting with Silco. So I feel like Isha kind of serves as as a sort of concrete figure with whom she can interact with and know that she's not going completely insane.
Yes.
And we'll see later on that what happens to what happens to Isha when she gets arrested, that kind of spurs her into getting back into the fight. And then what we see later on, the battle at the complex, that kind of breaks her right then and there, because she's effectively lost that link to reality, because because we've seen what happened with the relationship between her and Vi is that pretty much has been is dead at that point. So as much as she wants to be dismissive of of Isha. Isha serves as a surrogate to Vi, um, to help her sort of maintain that familial and sisterly connection that she didn't have, or where that was lost when she and Vi had a falling out in season one.
Yeah, absolutely, and I totally agree with you with that because, man, like just to have her character, and we'll definitely talk about her through Act Two as Isha, and kind of the important role that I think she has for just Jinx's overall sanity, because she absolutely is that link to like just
I mean,
having her not totally lose herself.
I'll say this. I mean, out of all of the characters in season two, I think she's the one who plays the most crucial role. Um, and that's what I mean. Given what we've seen with all the other characters, I mean, that's not saying much. But I think Isha plays a far more significant, important role in season two, and for all the characters, than even Jace himself or Victor. Even though
Yeah.
Victor is supposed to be, did you get the feeling that Victor was supposed to be the main villain of season two?
Yeah, yeah, I think
Okay.
I would definitely have him be the main villain, as far as the characters go, just because of, I guess, his warped idea of kind of finding perfection, right? Like, and I think there's just so much interesting kind of like debate you have between Victor and Jace as far as like, how do you look at humanity? Like sometimes not everything doesn't have to be perfect in order for society to exist, and there's something you could say about people's imperfections that makes people human. So yeah, there's a lot of very haughty kind of messages you can look at, but yeah, I would definitely agree with you. Victor was ultimately the villain for, I mean, really the show overall, right? And I think the plot thread that to me is the weakest, and we see it right at the end of this third episode in Act One, right, is this idea of the Black Rose. And this to me really bugged me the most as I was watching this, because I watched the show originally and then I came back and watched it a second time, and I felt like I got more confused the more I was thinking about it. Because you have Mbessa's having like this scene where she's just speaking with like one of the people from the Merchant Guild, and you find out that they've been like taken over by the Black Rose, right? And this is kind of where you start to understand more of the Black Rose, but they don't really go into a lot of detail. Like, that they're a group of mages and they have some type of like kind of, they have some pull and Noctis, right, where they're from. So you have kind of these, like, you have something going on there, but it's just not really developed or talked about enough of a way where it makes sense. So they're just kind of like this, kind of like seedy group of people that we never really get fleshed out. And to me, that was the biggest missed opportunity, because you have like some of the characters. Like I said, you have Mel. She gets abducted by the Black Rose. Like, we don't really define their powers. So yeah, they can just like abduct people. We don't know how they do it. They just kind of can because they're mages. And it's a shame because it just weakens the overall story. So, but yeah, the Black Rose, I know you talked about it a little bit, but I mean, would you say that to me, that was the weakest part of the season? I know like the whole thing with Victor was equally not too good, but at least with that, I understood what they wanted to do. With the Black Rose, I just didn't get it.
I mean, where did they come from exactly? Because, like I said, I scoured season one, but I couldn't find any information on them. Like, was that just like a random storyline they wanted to include just to make Mel feel important?
So that's kind of my understanding of it, because like we meet I think they gets called like the illusory mage or somebody, right? It's the character they kind of meet that they talk with, or at least Mel eventually talks with, and that's kind of my understanding of it. Is like from where they're from, right? Noctis is pretty much like where these mages are, and they're kind of this like organization that's like pulling a lot of strings. And there's this kind of situation where Mbessa, I guess, like had some type of deal with them that she kind of didn't follow through on, and because of it, that's why her son gets killed. So like that's all kind of like put out there, but we actually never see much of it. It's just kind of in passing dialogue that all that happens, which once again I think just shows how weak that is that this is supposed to be like kind of the crux for Ambessa's ambition is this kind of secret society, but we just don't really get a lot of it.
Yeah, it doesn't really, it doesn't really get fleshed out. I thought
No.
Ambessa was doing all of this because of what happened in the wake of Jinx's attack. I had no idea that it was because of the Black Rose, and they really didn't do a good job in explaining any of that either.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Because it seems like Ambessa herself doesn't seem to be aware of it until Mel has to remind her of it, and then she's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, it's apparently that was the thing, and it's whatever,
Yeah, and I think that's what would have helped out a lot more is if they fleshed it out. Because for me, Ambessa is such a cool character. I absolutely loved her character. I think she's kind of like that badass warrior woman type of thing, right? That's so cool because you see everything that she's capable of doing. So you see her manipulate Solo, right? Giving her kind of a voice in the council. She orchestrates that attack during the memorial services to kind of help like gain favor within the area. And I know we talked a little bit about that, but she also noticed that like for Caitlyn, she kind of acknowledges that she can manipulate her into kind of doing her own stuff. So you have all these very interesting things that she can do, but her purpose for doing it is kind of shrouded in like mystery because we just don't know about the Black Rose and exactly we kind of know that her kid got killed because of them, but we don't really know enough about like how everything transpired, what happened. This to me was where one of the episodes needed to have focus on was this backstory, because this would have given Ambessa's character a lot more motivation as we got into the final part of the series where I feel like it was missed big time.
Yeah, I mean, I think out of all the storylines, I think the Black Rose, was to your point, it was the weakest, but I think it was also the most unnecessary. Really.
Oh, absolutely, both. It's easily both.
I mean, there's nothing about it that made sense, and real. I mean, and really, the scenes, with the Black Rose could have been better used for developing more of Jace's storyline, or Jinx and Vi, or Caitlyn, or even Echo and Heimerdinger's trip to the multiverse. I mean,
yes.
Any of those storylines could have had far more screen time than the Black Rose one, because it just made me sit there and scratch my head and wonder, what the hell did I just see here?
Yeah, I 100% agree. So that is pretty much Act 1, and we'll just kind of skip over into Act 2 unless you had anything final thoughts about the first act.
No, I'm
but
good.
I think I figured we kind of talked about it a bit. So, but yeah, so we kind of have this, kind of a little bit of, I would say kind of a little bit of a time skip here. So we see like Caitlyn and Vi's, relationship has been fractured by everything that happened, and Vi's unwillingness to, kind of handle Jinx or deal with Jinx. So you see Caitlyn is now with this character of Maddie, who we didn't discuss, and I'm not even going to bother getting into it because there's so many characters.
I mean, again, Maddie was another unnecessary character.
Exactly. Yes. So she's one of many that I felt like introduced that wasn't necessary and not needed. So, but yeah, just know that Caitlyn's with this chick named Maddie, and we'll talk about the end because that's pretty much all it's worth to talk about. But I felt like I had to bring it up because it is something important for the story. So, or at least it's important for Caitlyn's character. I think we continue to see Jinx and Isha, kind of with their bonding, right? And we continue to see their relationship growing. And really, Jinx kind of struggles with the idea of being like a symbol, right? You brought that up earlier on, but it is kind of just really awkward to me that people look up to her as a symbol, right? Like I kind of get the idea behind it, but it feels like too many people are like with her, when I feel like reception for her should be relatively mixed. So what do you think about her? Like, why do so many people like go for Jinx, right? She just seems like, we see how crazy she is. It just seems weird that she's looked at as such this big symbol.
I mean, I think it's just due to the fact that she was the only one to, deal a major blow on Piltover and have it be significant. Because I mean, because if you look at all of the other, other protesters and other figures who've tried to, try to quote unquote improve Zon, both as a state and as a society, that at the end, it's either localized where it's just protest and it's very concentrated on Zon itself. They don't do anything to try to, bring this to the attention of Piltover, or they're in it for themselves, like we see with all the other Shimmer dealers who go on a little turf war after Soko's death. I think with what Jinx, is that she's so popular is because she represents the frustration of Zon and represents what they want to do, but she's actually done it. It's materialized.
Yes.
It's kind of, oddly enough, it's kind of like what we saw in Syria, over the past month, where you have this tyrannical government and you have all these these disparate rebel groups trying to do their best to take the fight to the regime, and then this the leader of this Al-Qaeda affiliated group becomes the de facto leader. It's because he was the one who led the organized resistance and toppled Assad. It's, in a weird way, you could sort of look at Jinx as that. She's the figure who unites everybody in Zon together. And it's funny too, because there's a scene where all the different factions of Zon are kind of brought together on this meeting. And it's the meeting where they eventually gets busted up and everybody gets arrested and thrown in jail. And that's where we see Isha gets thrown in jail.
Mm-hmm.
But but obviously the lady's telling her, "Hey, Jinx, it'd be great if you went because everybody's looking up to you." And Jinx just rejects it. She's like, "No, I that's not me. I don't want to be a part of that." But whether she likes it or not, I mean, just like with any popular political figure, whenever they enact something that's so momentous that gets the attention of the oppressors, you're going to find yourself at the center of attention. And I think that's why she's so appealing.
Yes.
Because think about it, season 1, Jinx is a nobody. Really,
Yeah.
she's not. I mean, if you asked anybody in Zon who Jinx was, they would have said, "Yeah, she's." They either would have given you two answers. They either would have said, "I don't know who she is," or they would have said she's one of Soko's underlings.
Yeah.
So it's remarkable to see her kind of rise to that near level of being the unifying force that everybody's looking for.
Yes.
And
she absolutely is reluctant to play that role in a very big way. And I like how you talked about kind of like Isha, and they had like that kind of big gathering that got broken up because Isha like goes to jail, and then this really is where I think you start to see like some of that. Like Jinx has always struggled to care for a lot of people, right? Obviously, we have this huge relationship she has with Vi that is very conflicting over the years, but I feel like this is a time where you kind of see her really have this kind of almost motherly bond for this person, that she cares about, something that I feel like has been a void for so long.
Well, I wouldn't say it was motherly. I think it's more of her trying to become like Vi, if you think about it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yep. No, I agree with that. So yeah, she kind of sees like she's taking over that umbrella. So kind of that Vi is always there, was protecting of Jinx. Now Jinx has that opportunity to do it for Isha. And we kind of see this is where we get introduced to a character, Warwick, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that for sure. So we get to meet this character Warwick, and I like how during this prison breakout sequence, right? I always really like the part where you have like the jailers that are going down there, and you see them having this confrontation, or about to have a confrontation with Savika and Jinx. And you hear kind of like all this rumble in the background, and I love how everyone just stops what they're doing because they recognize that there's a different threat that's going to be a lot worse. So I always like that. That's, I guess, just a soft spot for me, but I always enjoy that in movies where it's like, everyone's like looking at each other like we need to kill each other, but then there's a bigger threat that everyone's like, okay, without even saying everything, without saying anything, you understand that we need to join up for this, otherwise bad things are going to happen. And we see some bad things happen, because this was a hell of an introduction for Warwick, who we see kind of just goes in there and, I mean, just totally just like ripping people apart, just like decimates everything that's in front of him. You know, Jinx does kind of this noble sacrifice type of thing where she has Savika and Isha leave, and she stays behind to fight Warwick. And then this is where we find out that Warwick is actually Xander. And I have to tell you, I knew it was coming, but I don't know how I feel about it. What do you think about Xander coming back for this second season?
Well, my question is, why did they want to bring Vander back to begin with? That's what I don't get. Because because I mean, I'll be honest with you, I could go either way on that storyline. I mean, it was one of those storylines that I felt was, you know, it was nice, but it wasn't necessary, really. I also don't understand why Singh decided, in the course of trying to save his daughter, he had to go and basically, you know, combine human and wolf body parts to create this, I guess, man, bear, pig kind of creature. I mean, they're just, again, there are just so many questions about season 2 that just made me wonder what the heck was going on here.
Yeah, and it was totally weird, and you know, seeing not something that we've talked a lot about, just because once again, the show is just flooded with characters. So he kind of has his own, like, I described him as Mr. Freeze, right? He just kind of has that backstory of,
I mean, it kind of looks like Mr. Freeze also, if you think about it.
Yeah, I guess he does, yeah. Except he's, you know, doesn't have cool ice punch like Arnold did. But you know, kind of has, like, you know, his child, or his, wait, it's his child,
it's his daughter.
Right?
It's his daughter.
Yeah, it's his daughter, right? Because in, you know, with Arnold,
they don't want to make it too obvious. So.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we don't want to compare that. We don't have such a strong comparison there. So, but yeah, you kind of have this, you know, whole thing going on with his backstory, yeah, it felt unneeded and unnecessary. Now I would have been very interested to see how they did it, but I think the way that the whole story ended made me dislike the introduction of the character. I think there was a lot of other things that they could have done better, but knowing how it all ended, it felt cheap. But yeah, we'll definitely touch that at the end, because obviously we will see a lot of Vander / Warwick, and we'll probably use the names interchangeably. So just know that they're the same person. And we can kind of talk about that. But you know, I think this is where, you know, really we start to see kind of the gathering of Vi and Jinx and kind of the relationship trying to be mended now that Vander's back in the picture. Because we see Vi at the beginning of, like, the 5th episode, where she's got, like, all this, like, black face paint on. She reminded me of the Crow. I'm like, okay, that was very interesting.
Yeah, she, like, smears it all over her face, and she's just, like, you know, going around. It's kind of like a cross between the Crow and the intro to what was that Jake Gyllenhaal movie we reviewed last year? Remember the opening scene where he's just, like, going to the ring?
Roadhouse?
Like, Roadhouse, yes. You're going around just, like, getting it. That's what it reminded me of. It was like,
it's true.
I was like, okay, so she looks at the Crow and she's doing a Jake Gyllenhaal thing where she's just fighting everybody in the ring. Okay, well, whatever.
Yep, yeah. I mean, that's where we kind of meet the character. So we see how down she is after this whole kind of breakup with Caitlyn.
I mean, she sees her everywhere. She's, like, pining for her.
Yes, she absolutely is, and I like how, you know, I like how Jinx just kind of shows up and it's just kind of there. Like, there's just no, like, she's not following her. We just kind of see her, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, Jinx is here, and we can kind of see where, obviously, I'm sure plenty of mixed emotions between both the characters as they see each other, but, you know, Vander's kind of, I think, Xander, excuse me, is the weak spot for the two characters, because I think no matter what, like they both really respected him and what he did. So by obviously not really believing that Xander's alive, which I mean, who would at that stage? But we see them kind of like go into these mines, and we see Xander ends up attacking the group, and I like how Vi kind of takes over that protective role once again, right? So she's there to protect the people that are around her, kind of showing, I think, that fact that they'll always kind of be sisters. I have to admit, I did find, kind of those scenes to be very heartwarming, right? Because I think deep down, like we have this kind of cathartic idea that we want to see these characters kind of save their relationship. So to see like Vi, as this creature, right, is just going after them, to have her just kind of sit there and trust Jinx that this is indeed Vander, and to have it all work out, it definitely made me feel. I felt like a little kid watching something again, right? It was just very heartwarming, if not like maybe a little bit unnecessary, or maybe we haven't reached that spot that they deserve what they're getting, but it still made me feel good to see these characters get together like that. What about you? Did you not get into it, or was there just something about seeing these characters kind of recreate this family dynamic in a very awkward way? Did it make you feel good?
I mean, it just got shoehorned into it. I mean,
Son of a gun, Luca. That's fair.
I mean, I'm sorry, but that was a storyline that should have been left in season one. Like, I don't know why why did they decide to bring Vander back as a weird werewolf monster? And two, I just think it's funny how how he'll have these flashbacks when he sees the characters, and all of a sudden he gets like this warm and fuzzy kind of character. So I mean, I couldn't take it seriously, to be honest with you. I just thought it was just so ludicrous.
Yeah.
I mean, not to mention, yeah. I mean, well, not to mention the fact too that that this entire time everybody is just going around minding their own business, and they just don't happen to not notice anything about this creature that's roaming around, like potentially kill you at any point. I also thought what was funny was that Singed left a trail of blood for the monster to follow, with the understanding that the monster was going to come and free him. And yet, in the next episode, he's still there. He's still being interrogated. Like, you just kind of wonder, like, so what was the point of having the monster even go to the prison if he doesn't get freed in the end? But
there are some holes there. I will agree.
I mean, that was my huge hang up right there, because I kept thinking they're going to do this, but instead they do the exact opposite of what I'm thinking. Mm-hmm. And I'm in my mind, I'm thinking that makes absolutely no sense, because it doesn't advance the story. If the whole point is to kind of get you to understand what's going on here, they did the exact opposite. But apparently that was their MO, and I would say mission accomplished, because I had no freaking clue what was going on here.
Yes, there definitely were some, I would say, inconsistencies, to put it very nicely, with how some of that stuff unwrapped, for sure. So, and to me, even more awkward, right, was at the end of episode 5, we have Jace, who's, like, for all intents and purposes, been gone for multiple episodes, and he just kind of shows up looking really all gruff. And he runs into Salo, who's now being controlled by Victor, right? So we kind of see that Victor has some type of ability to control the people that he's has this connection with. Uh-huh. And there's kind of this really brief conversation that happens, and then all of a sudden Jace just straight up murders him.
So I want to go back a little bit, because we see Heimerdinger and Echo go into the vault with Jace. What exactly were they trying to do? Because what happens in the vault kind of leads up to where Jace kind of starts going, batshit crazy, and everybody with the hammer. So what were they trying to do exactly? I was lost on that.
Yeah. So from what I understand, right, and I'm sure there'll be people that blast me in the comments, so I apologize. But so initially, right, we see that Echo and Heimendinger, right? They find they're at the Fireflies hideout, and they notice that like this tree has this corruption on it.
Yeah, that
And
part I get. That part
yeah,
I
so
understand.
Heimendinger's like, oh, I've seen that corruption somewhere else. So they go in, they investigate it, they bump into Jace, and Jace is the one that suggests like, oh, we need to check out kind of this like hex core, hex vault or whatever. And then that's when once they go there, that's when Heimendinger kind of notices the corruption is spread there, and that's what ultimately just kind of just sends them off to the cosmos, right?
So
Like I don't.
is the corruption the reason why the hex core thing is doing that weird goopy morphing thing that it's doing?
That's
Or
my understanding. Yes. So
okay.
there's some type of corruption that happens because he mentions like the arcane, right? And I think this is kind of one of those things where too many thoughts trying to go into this 9 episodes is the fact that you have this thing and it kind of is not controllable, right? Stuff just happens.
Yeah,
And I
hence the
think
wild rune, yeah.
yes, exactly, right? There's where we get the wild rune idea where he's explaining that to them. So I think that's just an example of that is like how this thing could be like corrupted to kind of just do whatever, right? Which is where we get all this like weird stuff with the multiverse and the past and present stuff. There's just a lot of the kind of oddities that happen with that. It's pretty much just kind of like, hey, if we don't explain it, it could just about do anything you would want it to.
Now, were they going in the vault to try to do something about it, or were they just going in just to see if the corruption had spread?
Yes, I believe they were going there to examine it because that had been there the longest, right? And they were wondering why they hadn't seen anything weird happening. So that's why they went down there, was to examine it, because I guess that was the initial thing, the hex gate that was originally built, that had been using the hex tech stuff the longest period of time.
Okay, gotcha. And then from there, they get sucked in by that thing, and then we end
Yes.
up to where Jace, meets up with Sallow, and then he, ends him right then and there.
Yeah. Yes, very abruptly, which, like I said, is very kind of such a weird thing to do because we haven't seen Jason so long. Just to have his character show up and just straight up murder this guy, it was very off-putting. To your point, because I think Jace, we really, he was kind of like that beacon of hope, right? He was the one that wanted this to be used properly. He wanted the hex tech to be used for good. Yet we kind of see him go in a very different direction, which we find out more, and we'll get to it when we get to episode 7, because that's where we kind of get all the backstory for it. But he just kind of shows up and he's just murdering people. So yeah, he kind of sets a lot of these things in motion with some of his kind of his crazy antics that we find out more about as we go through. So that kind of leads us up to the end of Act 2, right? Our final episode, episode 6 for this act. And you have kind of the Vi, Jinx, and Isha group, and they're taking Xander, and they're going to, I'm just saying Victor's commune, right? I don't know how you want to describe it. Victor's town. And they're going there because they're expecting or hoping that Victor is going to be able to cure him of what, I don't know how exactly you fix that, but that is ultimately the hope.
I think what they were trying to do is they're trying to like make him less wolf and more man.
Yes. They want to save his mind, so to speak, right? Not so much obviously his physical appearance, which I don't know how he would rectify at that stage. But yes,
there's no saving that. He's all wolf right there.
Yes, I totally agree. So, but that's what they're doing, and you kind of have Mbessa, right, who is working with Singden, and they're making sure that they're trying to kind of recapture Xander because he plays such a kind of a critical role in his research. Once we're kind of there, right, we have kind of this meeting where Vi kind of notices like, oh, there's Singed and he's coming out, and we kind of have this nice meeting, and I say meeting because it's not really a meeting, but Caitlyn bumps into Vi after all this time. Um, and I have to admit, I did like this sequence, right? Because you kind of see them have this altercation, and I think deep down, like they're gonna rekindle the relationship, right? I don't think that came as a surprise to anybody. But I did like how they depicted this kind of plan, right? So Vi is captured by Caitlyn. Vi is brought up to Ambessa, and this whole time you're kind of wondering how everything's going to transpire. And then you kind of get these nice like little flashbacks where Caitlyn's like kind of showing how she's been distrusting of Ambessa, like doesn't really believe in her, knows that she's pulling some strings for other reasons. And I kind of like how the whole sequence broke out where Vi is able to, I guess, kind of incapacitate her, if even momentarily. It always does bring up the question, why not just kill her? Because she's going to be kind of a critical character that's probably not going to give up very easily. But I think ultimately, does what she needs to. But while that's going on, you just have Jace. He finds the commune, and he just kind of strolls up, and he, has like the little kid brings Jace to Victor, and without saying anything, Victor just attacks him. And that was so bizarre to me that Jace just kind of attacked. There was like no dialogue, there's no discussion, no nothing. It was just kind of there. So, what did you think about that? Like, I know we've bashed on Jace quite a little bit here. How much did that scene bother you? Where like we're just like he just doesn't seem to even like have any moments where he's even trying to talk through why he's doing the things that he's doing.
It's got a bit of a Terminator vibe to him.
Oh, very much so.
It's like it's like he's been sent back in time to destroy Skynet before it went online. I don't know. Like it's just, I mean, Jace is such a weird figure because on the one hand, the show is trying to make you think he's doing something heroic, but they're disguising it. But in the grand scheme of things, he's just irrational, which is a waste of a character because, and I already mentioned it. I already mentioned it earlier how I think they should have handled Jace's storyline, so I won't reiterate that. But I will say, I mean, I think what Victor did in manipulating all these people, I think it would have been a lot more impactful if they had Jace doing all of that instead.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and really, I think this kind of like leads up to our big confrontation at the end where we see kind of like Victor in this like weakened state. It kind of causes his connection with all of his followers to break. So you kind of see them all collapse, and for Xander, it kind of seems like it causes him to lose his sanity. Because he pretty much just becomes, I mean, he is like a rage monster, but he becomes an uncontrollable rage monster at this stage. And we kind of see this, kind of big climactic fight where, Xander is kind of going out there and he's just, attacking everybody. He's attacking Abessa's forces. You see him like knock down Jinx. And then you have this... You have this really rough scene, right, where you have Isha who kind of sees this, and Isha wanting to, kind of support Jinx, and she goes in, and she ultimately sacrifices herself to, I don't want to say kill, I guess disable. Xander would be the best way to put it, but she goes out there and does that, and she is dead, right? That is it. That is the end of Isha's character. I think it's always kind of hard. Like a lot of people tend to shy away from, younger characters getting killed. But they made the focal point of this episode, and really the end of the second season is to have Isha be killed. So what did you think about the ending of it? And what did you think about Isha's like a character just to kind of have her end like this?
I mean, I'll be honest with you, like as cold as it sounds, I think it was appropriate. Because that death was the impetus to kind of shatter, Jinx's reality and bring her back to, let her know that not everything is permanent. And as much as and I said it earlier. I said Isha is Jinx's anchor into reality, but
Hmm.
it's the kind of reality that she's comfortable with. So with Isha's death, you break that. I guess you could call it like a safe reality that Jinx kind of enjoys, and it brings her back into the reality that she needs to be in. And more importantly, because Isha served as a surrogate for Vi, I think I think by losing Isha, it kind of forces Jinx to confront the fact that she needs to reconnect and make it up with her sister, right?
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
you start to see that connection when they confront Vander in the, down the tunnels, and they sort of bond when they go to that kibbutz that Victor's running, but things don't really kind of come to, you know, or the process I should say doesn't actually begin start for them to heal the rift until Vi goes to prison, and and Jinx tells her, hey, don't let me get in the way of your happiness. You deserve to be happy. Um, because she comes to realize that that she does love her sister, and that she as much as Vi looks out for her and always tries to put her needs in front of her, I don't think that's something that Jinx ever really considers. So when she says that to Vi after she locks her in the cell, it's that moment where she realizes, hey, I am capable of caring for someone else besides myself and putting their needs before my own. I did it with Isha. Maybe I should consider doing it with my older sister.
Yes.
Um, which which honestly I thought was a lot more impactful than when they were in the tunnels and they were having that touchy feely moment with the Wolf Man. Really,
Hmm.
I thought that scene in the prison was far more impactful because it's Jinx finally realizing, being a sister is a two-way street. She needs to give love and care as much as she receives it from her older sister.
Yes. Yes.
That's how I
And
see it.
she, yeah, and I think she unfortunately kind of has this very, um, I would say, kind of polluted mindset for how to get there, as we kind of see with her character as we go through. And I think this is a good time to like talk about like where we start off with Act Three, because we start off and really this is about like understanding what happened when Echo, Heimendinger, and Jace all kind of got brought into this multiverse. So you see like Echo, he goes to this reality and eventually does meet up with Heimendinger, so they're all there. And really, kind of what happened in this reality is you have when they do the heist, or like when they're stealing the hex stuff. Um, in this reality, Vi is actually killed, and what I thought was really weird, or I guess just an observation for what happened, with Vi being killed, everything kind of feels better for everybody. And I don't know if that was the intent of the story, but like you see, like Echo has this, kind of relationship with Jinx. You see Vander and Silco are friends again. Milo and Clank are alive. Benzo's still alive, and Echo has this, kind of nice moment where they get together and they kind of hug it out. But I thought it was so weird that like it almost felt like the show was trying to tell us that by dying would have been better for these characters. What did you think about that? Did you pick up on that, or like I guess how did you possibly interpret that? I guess idea.
I mean, it kind of reminded me of that South Park special about COVID, where um where Cartman becomes a Jewish rabbi and everything, is sort of right, but Stan is unhappy. So then when they go back in time to fix the timeline, um Cartman ends up being a homeless drunk, and Stan's having a wonderful life. That's what it reminded me of.
Mm.
Is the fact that if you take out one person who was very, very important, you end up having a much better, future. But it's not all that great because because now Powder doesn't have Vi in her life to look out
Yes.
for her. And even though
Very-
she does have this, extended family around her, even though she's got Vander and Silco and everybody, it's just not the same without her older sister. So you kind of have to wonder, like, which reality is better? Is it the one where Zahn is happy, but but everybody kind of understands that they don't have a very important figure in their life, or for Zahn to be this horrible dystopian state, but at least the two sisters have each other.
Yeah. And I would say, like, depending on how you all look at it, I mean, we don't, unfortunately, I think, get a whole lot of, I think Jinx's mindset in this other reality. I mean, she generally does seem to be happy though. So, like, how much of that is just, with her, with the Vi dying, did it allow her to maybe come to terms in a different way to, kind of deal with her grief? It's just, it opened up a lot of, I think, questions. I was like, I don't know what
but I
they're
mean,
trying
you
to go
remember,
for with this.
but I mean, you remember that one scene where they're at that altar, when they're lighting the candles, and Echo asks her what happens, and all of a sudden, Jinx gets very serious, and she's like, "That's not even funny. Like,
Yeah,
why would
that's
you even
true.
ask that?" So,
Mhm.
so it definitely is a sore spot, because
Yes,
it's one of those things that, hey, this isn't something that you should just talk about flippantly. Like, come on, like,
sure.
know
Yeah,
your limits.
yeah. No. It definitely, it definitely has an impact with their character. How much of it I don't think got really explored in the very short time that we're here, because you kind of have that going on, and then you have Echo and Heimendinger, like, they're trying to get back to their own reality, and really in this one, because of the whole debacle in the heist at the beginning, Hextech doesn't exist here, right? So Jace is never, doesn't get it figured out. Like, it's just, it kind of creates this alternate world. So really, they have to kind of start off from scratch. And when they're kind of like building all this stuff, um, they create this. I don't want to say time machine, because I think that's not really accurate. It could only take them back a few seconds, but they do kind of create this. Um, and I forget the term that they use. It creates like a little time dilation where they can go back in time. I think it was 3 or 4 seconds
Yeah.
before reality starts to kind of disintegrate. Um, but they kind of help create this as they're trying to go back. And this is where, they kind of get everything set up. I definitely like that scene where Echo and Jinx are kind of there, and you can kind of see it's kind of like, what if, right? What if, they're in this situation, because they kind of like share this kiss. And it's like, wow, these characters, their situations are very, very different in the world that we know, where the thought wouldn't even cross either of their minds. But in this world, because of how everything happened, they were in some form of relationship. How deep, don't want to get into that because we don't get a lot of that. But kind of interesting to see how different it is for that. And you kind of see Echo as he's getting sent back to his time. Heimendinger has to sacrifice himself as his like little head blows up, um, and is able to send him back. So we have kind of their two arcs coming together, and then we have Jace on the flip side of thing. We see more about kind of what happened with his character, where he kind of meets the cloak character, right? The cloak character that we know from the first season that kind of started his interest in the idea of magic and everything like that. So he meets this cloak character, and he's pretty much just sitting there and he's exploring this world that is in ruin. And I just, the visuals for this, I just thoroughly enjoyed. And we see there's these kind of like weird humanoid creatures that are there that we don't really know what they are at this stage, but we find out that these are people, right? These humanoid creatures are really people that have, I'm going to use air quotes as well, right? Survived this event.
Well, they're not really people. They kind of morphed into like these weird android kind of
correct. Yes.
characters.
They look very mechanical. I think they're, kind of unfortunately like the people that have transcended. I guess their physical body, so to say. It's kind of hard because they don't really go into a lot of detail But you're correct, right? They're very robot looking. But I think they are indeed actual people that are just there now with nothing to do. And Jace, kind of comes out of this reality thinking like Hex Tech bad. I need to stop everything. Like this has to be stopped. And I feel very frustrated with that because here's my whole thing. It puts in perspective why Jace is doing what he's doing, but he doesn't really do it in a rational way, right? I think it's kind of like one of those situations where if you were put into a world where you know that your creation, right, has destroyed everything, would you feel very sane coming out of that circumstance, right? If you created something, Luca, that would cause the whole world to be eradicated, how would you react for you wanting to resolve that situation so that doesn't have a repeat situation?
I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask about that.
Right?
I should be asking you because you're the more sane of the two of us. Really.
Well, I have some doubts about that, but I appreciate that. But it is interesting, right? And like you can understand his just like total his total fixation on wanting to fix things has made him irrational. But it is hard. Like you have to think like he survived there for who knows how long, right? Days, weeks. Like, he had to do something to like fix his leg. Like he's like looking at this world that it's his fault, right? Like he caused this destruction. I couldn't imagine having all that weight of you ending your world because of your creation. So I still very well depicted.
Well, I was gonna say like him being in the pit kind of epitomizes his sense of helplessness, really, because
yes, right.
he is literally unable to crawl out of the hole he has created.
Yes, right.
So which is perfect because it kind of if you think about it, kind of motivates you to kind of work even harder, try even harder, because he had to basically take apart everything that he's built in order to escape this world, and then go and do what he did.
Yes, and I think it also does too. It kind of shows his like him going into that cave or him like falling down is like him losing his grip on his sanity. That's how I really interpreted that, because I mean the weight of you doing something that will cause such a cataclysmic problem is absolutely just, it's mind-numbing to me. I don't know how I would come to grips with that. But I think for an audience, right, I think we're still expecting the character to at least do some rational things to do it. And I mean, he does get better through the last 2 episodes, right? As he kind of gets out of this, he does, kind of regain some of that semblance, but it does still kind of leave this kind of sour taste in your mouth that he didn't really maybe go about this the right way, or a way that made a lot of sense. But I did want to talk about one thing, right? Because we talked about multiverse, and I wanted to talk about this with you. What are your thoughts about the multiverse and how they, I guess, are dealing with it in this show?
I mean, if you want the short answer, I would think it was unnecessary. If you want the long answer,
how much multiverse stuff goes, but yes, I agree.
Right now, if you want the long answer, I think it was nice for us to have seen what might have been or what could have been, right?
Yes.
Because season 1 and most of season 2 kind of plays up the fact that there's a huge divide between Piltover and Zon. So you kind of so naturally it kind of makes you wonder, what would life have been like had they been able to work things out, have they been able to find a way to coexist. And you do see it very briefly. So I will as much as I dislike that storyline, I will also give them props for kind of scratching that itch that we've had, because it does show us, hey, yes, it is possible for Zon and Piltover to coexist, and it is possible for the two of them to actually be on good terms and not have to go through the shit that we've seen for the past season or two. But I also felt like in the end it really didn't add much to the whole Hex Tech saga that was trying to build. Because I mean, because well, here's another thing I want to ask. So in the end, are they trying to control or are they trying to destroy the Wild Rune? That's what I don't get. Because my thing is that they well, in this case, Jace goes forward in time, and Echo and Heimerdinger go somewhere else. Were they trying to figure out a way to kind of destroy the Wild Rune, or kind of harness it to turn to another source of energy? That's what I don't get.
Yeah, for Heimerdinger and Echo, I didn't think I quite understood what their motivations were. Like, I know they're trying to create something, and I think just it felt like they weren't sure what they created, or they weren't sure exactly how they got there. Whereas I think with Jace, it's a lot more, I think, straightforward, that he just views Hex Tech as this evil thing. And his want, like we see, as we go into the last part of it, is him wanting to kind of destroy the creation that he's built, because for him, he looks at it like there's no way for us to really, like, if we use Hex Tech, it's ultimately always going to end in the destruction of society. That's how I kind of viewed it as far as Jace's mindset goes. Echo and Heimerdinger were a little bit more weird to me. But also to like the multiverse part, because I definitely want to touch on that, because I know we've really ragged on it, especially in all the comic stuff where we've seen the multiverse and it just feels kind of done to death. This, I felt like, regardless of its story importance or how much it should have been in there, I did enjoy this more than what I've seen previously. Because it did kind of give us a very interesting glimpse into, not only this alternate reality where we see, like, for a fact that this Hex Tech not being around would lead to, this kind of better society for everybody. But on the flip side of it, we see, Jace kind of getting the opposite end of that, where he sees, like, the use of Hex Tech, that it's ultimately going to lead to everyone's demise. So very interesting how we see one very positive kind of showing of, not having Hex Tech, where the other one we see the total negative side of things, of how Hex Tech is going to bring the ruin to everything. So I thought that was at least well done. And I like that better than what we've seen in kind of the other stuff that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's episode 7. And I think this is going to lead us into kind of our final 2 episodes that I think we really put the focus on, kind of moving all of our characters into where they need to be for the finale here. So episode 8, we kind of see Mel, right, who's once again been sidelined for some time, right? And one of my issues with the show, Mel's been kind of pretty much gone for most of the second act. So we see her, she's awakening her powers, right? So this is where we kind of get more of the backstory, very little backstory, but at least some idea of, kind of Mbessa and how they're connected with the Black Rose. So it's not a very good, or I think a very, I would say, effective way of explaining the story, but they kind of sprinkle a few things in there. And something I thought that was interesting that I think it took me 2 sittings to kind of see was Mel is the offspring of Mbessa and a mage that she had relations with.
Yeah, the illegitimate kid that they were talking about.
Yes, which I did find, like, I did find to be interesting, even though we don't know much about this mage society in the Black Rose. Kind of interesting, and I think this just kind of furthers that idea that I can easily see Mbessa wanting to get knocked up by a mage in the idea that she would have a kid that had powers. That feels on brand for her, as crazy that is. But that makes a lot of sense. And we also see Mel kind of confronts her mother about everything that's happening with the Black Rose. And yeah, they don't do a very good job of explaining it, and that's by far the weakest part for me. But it does happen.
I mean, but they also really don't go into too much detail and explain, who or what the Black Rose is. All we know is it's just this weird thing that wraps people in thorny things and then kills them.
Yes. Yeah, it's like a mage society, and then there's like this like weird magic realm that they go to. So yes, they don't really develop that or explain that, and we see that unfortunately throughout. So big missed opportunity there. I think everyone would agree with. And we also see kind of this. We kind of see the aftermath, right, of the what happened at the Victor's commune after Jace attacked him, and we see that um, our boy Vander is being kind of used as, I guess, like a way of keeping Victor alive. And this to me was one of the weirdest things because I really had to. I feel like because they're doing so much with all these characters, I had to kind of sit down and think about what exactly happened here. So the way I'm going to explain it, and you can please correct me if I'm wrong, because this is my interpretation of it. So Victor is in this weakened state. He needs Vander's life essence, blood, or whatever to kind of give him powers. And then Victor's kind of dealing with this idea that humanity is just like imperfect. So he wants to create this really perfect idea, but in order to do that, he needs the powers from like the Hex Gate that's in Piltover. So he solicits the help from Mbessa to give her army powers so he can do it. And Mbessa's also going to get the benefit of the powerful army. But yeah, that was the reason for it, and I just thought it was so convoluted. And I don't know. Were you rolling your eyes at this stage? Because it was so hard to follow kind of the character motivations here at the end.
I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, they're both getting what they want because Mbessa is getting a powerful army, and Victor is mainly using her as a distraction to get to the Hex core.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
Because if you think about both of them are after the same thing. They're after power, but in a very different sense. So
yes. The reasons behind their want for it is the confusing aspect of it. But yes, like ultimately it makes sense for them to kind of be these allies in this situation. So yeah, we have kind of that going on because ultimately Mbessa is going to be sending her forces with kind of her army with the support of Victor to go after Piltover. And we also see what kind of happens at the aftermath because, Jinx was super concerned with Vi's survival. And once she's able to bring her back, Jinx just kind of is like, throw me in jail. Like, that's it. Like, she's kind of lost, I think, her ideas, and she's her losing Isha has really kind of shown that anything good that she has, she ruins, or at least that's the way that she looks at it. She ruins anything positive that's in her life, and she's, Isha was her other part of her family. So after watching, Vander get quote unquote killed, you have your fractured relationship with your sister, and now Isha, who's been kind of your tether to your kind of humanity, is also gone, and that kind of puts her in this like really bad state. And you see you see Vi meets her in the jail cell and is like still trying to support her, still wanting to be like, I see the good in you. And I like how she steals the keys and locks Vi behind, and she's just like, there is no good in me. Like, this is her moment. She's hit as low as she could possibly hit. And it's kind of made her, she wants to end her life. Like, she just doesn't see hope anymore. And I think that's what kind of brings her into the final episode. And then we also have, and I guess we cannot not talk about this, but we obviously won't go into anything super graphic. But we see Caitlyn shows up, knowing full well that Vi would never be able to stay away from Jinx no matter what. And they, how would I put this, rekindle their relationship in the jail cell. which we won't go into anything specific with that, but I know obviously the internet definitely talked about that a lot.
I mean, it made every nerd's fantasy come true. Let's put it that way.
Yes. There definitely was. There was a lot of people. I remember seeing like stuff about release the director's cut of that scene, but like I said, won't get into too much detail. We also see kind of the interesting reconnection of Jason Bell, who have been pretty much not like they've been pretty much like separated for most of the series. Where Jace kind of shows up and just kind of happens to meet Mel here in Piltover. And they're, kind of having this discussion about everything that transpired. And then this is where we kind of get our first, well, not really our first glimpse, but this is where we see it in this reality, is this kind of like humanoid looking creature that attacks them. And I don't know if you got this, but I definitely got this. I understood this to be Huck, right? Huck, the guy that was infected with the shimmer. This is actually who I thought it was Huck. Did you get that too?
I mean, I really didn't get any vibes, but I mean that's as good of an explanation as anything.
Okay, we'll go with that, right? I like that explanation because Huck was kind of the first one that I felt like was.
I think it was meant to be ambiguous. That was the thing. So.
Yeah. There's definitely ambiguity to it, right? Like they're all kind of just faceless. They all look the same. So that absolutely was done on purpose. So maybe that's just me trying to be like, hey, this is a character that we know, and look what happened to the character. He's lost all semblance of his individuality. So I think that's maybe me putting too much into it, but I kind of looked at it like that. And this is where we kind of see like Mel actually using her powers for the first time as a mage. And this would be, very critical for kind of what happens in our final episode as they're fighting. And I like how, even though Jace has been not very likable, I'm not like Jace throughout much of the season, I do feel like he kind of rekindles at least some of his sanity at this kind of pivotal juncture. And I like how Jace kind of brings everybody together. So you have the Piltovanites, I don't know, and the Zonites, they kind of like get together and they're like, hey, look, Ambessa, she's about to bring this powerful army here. Like they have these like, crazy creatures that are super, super tough. And we're going to have to get together and we have to put all of our differences aside and realize that if we don't take care of this now, everything's going to end.
It's just fun. It's just funny how Jace, when he comes back, he just expects everything to be hunky dory. It's like, oh, well, well, forget the fact that Piltover and Zon, they're at each other's throats. Let's just put that aside in the name of brotherly love to basically. It's like in season 8 of Game of Thrones where all the kingdoms unite to kind of take on the White Walkers.
Yes.
So
I knew that reference was coming, and it's warranted, right? I agree with that. Now, I will say I do like that general mindset. I don't think the show should have gone that way, but I do like that mindset that there is this ultimately greater evil, and people have to put their BS to the side in order to deal with it.
It's an unnecessary greater evil, but it's whatever.
Yes, of course. Yes, I totally agree. Like it is an unnecessary greater evil. It's kind of like an Independence Day where like everyone gets together. It's like, okay, like, we all hate each other, but you know what? These aliens are really bad and we need to get rid of them. I kind of looked at that in the same light. And this kind of sets up our final act. And this is where, everything is crazy, right? And I feel like there's just so much going on. So I'm going to try to take bits and pieces of this final episode to try to help kind of put everything into perspective for what's going on. So
mind you, it was a really, really good battle scene. I'll give them that.
Oh, for sure. Yes. Like there's a lot of good things here and it is, very well put together. It's just very bloated with everything that's going on. Right. So episode 9, it really starts off where we have this good conversation with Echo and Jinx. And I like this, especially after we saw like episode 7 in this different reality. You know, Echo and Jinx really would have been like a couple, they would have been together in some type of fashion if their realities were a little bit different. So to see them not really like have that happen, but to see that there is some type of bond there between these two characters, I felt like was nice. And then that's kind of juxtaposed with, as soon as that scene's over, we're just in the middle of combat. Like we don't see, like the forces aren't like landing. We don't see anything dramatic. Like we're just in the fight. And we just kind of see like a whole bunch of random things happen that just don't really have a lot of weight to them, because it just never got the screen time that was needed. So there's this character, his name is Loris, right? Do you remember who Loris is? If I just tell you who Loris is, do you know the name Loris?
No, I don't.
Okay. So Loris, right? So he's the guy that had the shield that was kind of friends with Vi when she was going through all of her weird stuff.
Oh, he was a trainer dude, wasn't he?
Yeah, like he was the big guy. He was the big guy that had the shield and everything.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, yeah, I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah, so that was Loris, right? Now, I'm not the least bit shocked that you don't know the name, right? Because I think his name was only mentioned maybe once or twice before this moment. And like he's up there on the gun and he gets killed. I'm just like, okay, cool, that's whatever, right? Like, I mean, he seemed like a cool character, but I wouldn't know because you never got a screen time to really get to know him.
I mean, but what's weird is that you see him pop up in the background. So you would figured, hey, maybe we need to know a little bit more about this guy. But no, he's kind of like, I mean, he's kind of like Maddie, really. Like he pops in every now and then, but most of the time he's just like standing in the background, not saying anything.
Yeah, exactly, right. Like they're part of that task force that Caitlin put together. There's another one, the like amphibious looking guy that I don't even remember his name.
I don't think he even has a name, dude.
Yeah,
I don't remember him saying a word.
Into it. Yeah, because it's too hard to keep track of him. But he dies. So just for everyone to be knowing, you know, we're so sorry. Loris got killed. And then Maddie betrays Caitlin, and she's about to kill Caitlin before like Mel uses her shield and reflects the bullet, and Maddie's dead. So Maddie's now gone. That was another one. I don't get what the motivation was behind this. I guess she was like wanted to be with Ambessa. Like I don't know if this. I don't know. What did you pick up anything on that, or were you just as lost as me?
I mean,
was it because like she loved Caitlin and she saw like how like she was never gonna be there, so this was like her way of getting? I don't know. I'm throwing anything.
I'm thinking it's just more the fact that she was just doing her job as a double agent. You know, kind of like those old school spy movies you used to watch back in the day.
Sure.
You know, it's like it's kind of like I'll tell you what it is. A part of me was disappointed that she didn't say, "Oh, it's nothing personal; it's just business." But she did say something similar where it's like, well, at least you kept the bed warm or something like that.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you go for with that. I thought the same thing. So, but yeah, like, you know, she did it. She was, you know, whatever, double agent. I don't think they really kind of set us up for that type of thing, but that happened.
It wasn't fleshed out, you know.
Yes, exactly. But you know, she kind of gets killed, so you know, we lost another character from that team. And you know, things are looking pretty dire for our group, and you know, that's kind of where things typically happen, is where, you know, it looks like everything's bad and you're losing the battle. So what happens? You have the reinforcements come in, so you see Jinx and Echo show up, and you see the firelights show up, and then you also see like the people of Zon joining the fight. So it's like, you know, rah, like we're all getting connected now. And we're going to help turn the tides of battle. And all in all, right, you have this going on, and everyone's trying to destroy, or they're wanting to destroy this egg that they think Victor's in, right? And I say egg, I don't want people to think like he looks like, you know, he's hatching into a chicken or something.
But to be fair, it does look like an egg, so.
Yeah, it does, right? It does, right? He's just like in this like little ball thing. And you know, lo and behold, like they eventually like are able to destroy it, and no one's in there. And we find out that Victor's actually like just secretly infiltrated the Hex Gates. And we see he's this is where he confronts Jace. Jace has been in there trying to disable it. Unfortunately, Victor just has all this power, so it just seems like there's not a whole lot you can do. So we have, I think, kind of this skirmish where you have Kate and Mel. So they're fighting against Mbessa. And like I said, I kind of liked how they did this sequence. And that's one thing I will say, like, they definitely did the fight sequences really well. They were, I think, depicted very well. And you see, like, kind of Caitlyn, kind of using her kind of like fighting prowess that she got through Mbessa, right? Because Mbessa was the one who's training her. So kind of, you see Kate kind of like, leveraging her skills there. And Mel's trying to use her magic, but they just can't seem to get the upper hand. But eventually, you see Kate, she kind of sacrifices her eye to take a blow, to take off these runes, and this allows Mel to kill her mother, but sort of not sort of, right? Because she kind of, like, I guess, like, uses the Black Rose, and this brings her into, like, the weird, like, magical realm that we've seen. I guess she betrays the mage that's there, this illusory mage that we've seen before, in order to, like, bring her mother out. But the mother still dies. But I guess, it's to avoid, like, her being tortured or whatever they're going to do there. I don't know.
Well, a little off topic here. Do we ever find out who that mysterious Black Rose mage is?
So,
because she keeps taking on all these different forms, so we never actually see who she is.
Yeah, so I want to say I saw her get referenced a few times as like this illusory mage. I think eventually, I believe that there was some type of, I think, like name, or they gave some type of, I think, information about the character, but I don't think it was something that was really put into the show, so I didn't really find too much about it.
Because you remember that scene where I think it was like 4 or 5 where Mbessa meets with this old lady, this old witch, and yes. She initially tries to assassinate Mbessa, but then Mbessa and Rick just kind of get the jump on her, and then she ends up getting killed. I wasn't sure if that was like, I guess, a physical manifestation of that mage that we see later on, who ends up killing Mbessa in the train.
So she, from my understanding, is she's able to control people, because that person we see, she's from the Merchant Guild. So that's actually a character that we've seen and interacted with before. But I guess because of this mage, because the mage is like super powerful, like she's able to control or do stuff with people. So I think that even though they don't do a good job of ultimately explaining all of that, that's, I think, what they're going for with this character, is that she's able to kind of control and do stuff. Like, she just has a lot of range with the character. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think it really goes into a whole lot. I've seen people like refer to her, I believe, as like LeBlanc, right? Who's like the leader of the Black Rose, who we've seen, but there just unfortunately just wasn't a ton out there that I could kind of see with that. I'm assuming that there's more to come with that, or there's more material that's out there that's going to kind of help explain that. But I don't think the show did exactly a whole lot to flesh that out. But yeah, so that is the Black Rose, LeBlanc, the leader, the illusory mage, has some type of abilities like that, but don't ultimately get fleshed out. So you have kind of that part of the battle end where we have Kate and Mel ultimately besting Mbessa. So that kind of like gives us closure for that particular instance. But of course, we also have another big fight that's going on, and that is with Vander. He shows up and he's kind of fully assimilated now, and there's kind of these like sequences that you see where it looks like, for all intents and purposes, like Banner just doesn't have any memories anymore. Like we see, like he kind of has these memories, and you kind of see them burning away, like he's losing those memories. But like he's attacking Vi and Jinx, and they kind of have all this crazy stuff going on. But we'll save them for the very end because we need to talk about whatever happened with Victor and Jace, which was really confusing because it felt like we kind of got into a battle of ideals at the end. And I felt like that just muddied more of the show for me. Because you have Victor who wanted everything to be perfect, right? Like he had this idea of wanting to obtain perfection, or that's how I looked at it. And Jace, he didn't feel like that was necessary or needed, right? He saw that people that were imperfect still had a lot that they brought to the table, which I did enjoy because, Victor had all of his, physical issues, but Jace never really looked at him wrong like that. So even though I didn't like their kind of like battle of ideology, I did like the idea that Jace, all things being said, even though his character's kind of all over the map in this season, he still ultimately, still cherishes friendship with Victor. And just because Victor was, had this like physical weakness to him, it didn't change the fact that that Jace still looked at him in a kind light. But it's murky with everything else. So did you want to add anything to that? I know we're just kind of all over the map here at the ending, but I just feel like they were just trying to they wanted to close so many loops here at the very end.
I mean, they tried to close those loops, but I felt like they didn't do a very good job in closing them because it kind of made you wonder, like, could they have done it a different way? My thing is, is the fact that you have Victor kind of going for this Ultron look, because when you see him, I mean, my God, like he is like 100 degrees separate from humanity.
Yes.
Like they really want to hammer home the fact that he does not like humanity at all.
Yes.
And to quote Bender Rodriguez, he's going on this mission to kill all humans. Really.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What I also find a bit weird is the fact that it's the fact that we later find out that the person he's been talking to has been Victor himself, but
Mm-hmm.
but this is a Victor who's, I guess, regained his humanity. So I'm kind of wondering, like, what sort of happened in the intermediate period between him destroying the world and then him deciding, oh, well, maybe it wasn't such a good idea after all.
Yeah.
That's what made me, scratch my head, because I'm assuming, like, originally he must have killed Jace and he must have realized, oh, well, yeah, that was my bad. Like, maybe I shouldn't have done that.
I want to see if you picked up on this or not, right? Because it's interesting that you bring that up, because there was the scene at the end really stuck with me, right? So you remember at the end of episode 7, right, where Jace is meeting the cloaked figure, right?
Yeah.
Did you see that was Jace that had the hammer, right? That was at the very end.
Are talking about the that rusted hammer that he grabs onto?
Yes, right. The
Okay.
hammer that he uses, because at the end of this or when Victor is like trying to like turn everybody, Jace takes the similar position on top. So I actually think
I did see that. So
okay, yeah,
so,
I thought.
But I mean that's the thing that kind of confused me, is the fact that is the fact that you've got Jace here who's sort of frozen in the sort of death position, I guess in the future, but then you have current Jace who's kind of trying to go back and kind of fix the whole thing. It became one huge mind fuck.
Really. Yeah, yes. There definitely was this interesting thing. I applaud them for wanting to do something unique like that, and I thought that was a very cool touch, if even just not well formulated or put together.
But they overcomplicated it. That's the thing.
Of course,
I
yes,
mean,
yes.
they should follow a very simple rule that all writers need to follow: keep it simple, stupid,
yes,
or keep it super simple. And what they were trying to do here, it was kind of like a chicken or egg kind of thing. And it's like, no, dude, like You're making it way harder than it needs to be.
Agreed. Agreed. Yes, I will not. I will not challenge that at all. So, but it looks like everyone's done. So you got you know, you got I guess the last person that's here that ultimately plays the biggest role, which to me felt so weird, was Echo, right? Echo, a character that, was there in the first season, right? I mean, like, not an unknown character. He obviously played some role there. But it felt so weird that he was ultimately the one that is going to save the day, using his little Deus Ex Machina time machine, that is able to kind of sit there and go back. And Echo ends up being, I mean, the hero. I guess you could also say, like, eventually Jace is able to convince Victor that what he's doing is wrong. So I guess in that sense, you could also maybe consider Jace being the hero. But from a physical standpoint, Echo is the one that ultimately saves the day, which was odd, right? I definitely thought that was weird, but that's ultimately how it ends, where Echo is able to, I guess, defeat, air quotes, defeat Victor. And Victor and Jace kind of have this like weird bonding moment, and they kind of just, I guess, zoop out of existence or something. Echo kind of saves the day, and it kind of leads us to kind of the ending here, where all of the entities, right, that are connected to Victor all kind of are incapacitated now or falling apart. And you see Vi is there next to Vander, and she's emotional. She can't let him go, blah, 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 blah. And of course, Vander like regains consciousness. And because of it, Jinx ends up sacrificing herself to save Vi, in kind of this, very, I would say, touching moment where the sisters she has to kind of let go of her, which I think kind of goes very well with the idea that, Jinx just doesn't feel like there's a way for her to kind of dig herself out of what she is. And, she's done so many bad things. How can you ever recover from all the bad things that you've done? And, she ultimately needs to let go of her sister in both a physical and, I guess, a family type of dynamic, as she kind of crashes down with Vander. And that's how it pretty much ends. Like, we do kind of get this little bit of epilogue at the end where we see, people kind of mourning the loss of all the people that died in this conflict. Yeah, that's the end of it. And what a ride, right? And so I guess I'm going to help try to summarize my thoughts, right? We've been rambling for 2 hours, and I definitely apologize for that, because we had a lot to cover. We're pretty much doing 6 hours of work to kind of condense this down into something that's hopefully bite-sized enough for people to get into it.
I mean, we will be breaking this into smaller episodes that will air weekly. So I mean, so you don't have to worry about trying to take it all in right now. I mean, that's something we'll do later. I will say this though. So to go to your point about Jinx, letting go and just giving up on everything. I think what that is sort of a callback to the parallel timeline where Vi isn't there. So, so when Vi wasn't there, Zon and everybody was happy. And if you think about what we see in the epilogue, it kind of becomes a fulfillment, except instead of, Vi being gone, it's Jinx, really.
Oh, that's interesting. I did not pick up on that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, because you see Savika, she takes her seat at the council table. So
yes.
So clearly Zon is being incorporated into the political process of Piltover. So in a way, everything kind of comes full circle. I mean, what we saw in that parallel universe reflected what could have been, or what could have been that reality, and what we see by the end of episode 9 is the road to kind of syncing up with what we see in that parallel universe. Now, obviously, there are a few things that are missing. Obviously, Silco and Jinx aren't there, and obviously Vander is gone. But we see that but we see that it's sort of taking things in the direction of where things need to be at the
Yeah.
end.
Yes. So there's definitely some silver linings. So, but yeah, so I'll go ahead and I'll give my final thoughts to this because, as someone that loved the first season, um, I liked aspects of the second season, and I still felt like there was a good show in there. I just unfortunately think that too much of it, there was just too much other stuff that made it way too bloated.
Mhm.
And I think that is by far my biggest issue with it because, like, animation, superb, right? Fantastic animation. Loved it. Loved the look of it. Kind of the alternate reality world, the just like seeing like the smoke when it's building up, and they kind of almost make the smoke be its own type of character, and you got just the fight sequence is so well done, like just super cool. And one thing I always feel like doesn't get enough attention nowadays that this show does very well, the soundtrack is great.
Mhm.
I love the soundtrack to this. The soundtrack during the fight sequences, kind of the songs that happen where, in the world where Echo and Powder are together. I just like love the song that plays during that, where you kind of see them getting this bond. It is just so well done. And I think there's part of this that works well with the story. It just got a little bit too long in the tooth. I think they wanted to do too much, and it absolutely should have been more seasons. I'm really bummed that this is where they felt like they wanted to end. I know they've discussed doing kind of like more like side stuff with this, so not necessarily maybe with these characters, but still within this universe. So maybe we'll see, more of this in the future. But I felt like they wanted to do too much and it just created too many problems. The Black Rose in particular really bothered me because I just feel like it was kind of a huge character moment or a huge character motivation for some of the characters, but it doesn't really get drawn out too well. And I think you put it extremely well at the beginning of the review when we're talking about this. The show focused too much on, I think, Victor and Jace and their kind of, I guess, ideology conflict, as opposed to just kind of keeping the story a lot more focused on, kind of, Piltover versus Zahn, and just focusing on the character dynamics that we had with Vi and Jinx. Like, I just felt like there was too much that they wanted to add, like having like Maddie in it and whoever the hell Loris is. You're just trying to do too much with it, and it's such a shame. I still think one thing that was a huge standout for me in this season was number one, I absolutely loved Mbessa's character. Now, I don't think that they wrote her super well, and that'll be, it is what it is with that. But I just love the fact that she's absolutely a wolf in wolf's clothing, right? There's no mistaking her. When you see her, you know that she is she is willing to do anything it takes for her own ambition. And there's something interesting to be said about that that I really liked. I think Vi to me was a lot weaker this year. I felt like she kind of was too on the fence about everything. I just felt like her character never was willing to commit to something, and that kind of took me out of it. Whereas Jinx, I felt like went through a whole lot more kind of character changes because of everything she go through with someone like Isha, who I think kind of did more with that. And yeah, I think that's kind of my, I guess, final thoughts as much as I could put together after going through 9 episodes and 6 hours worth of material. Love the music, love the art. I just wish they focused on the story for season 1. Should have just been where they wanted to continue it without trying to bring in all this other stuff with the arcane, the magic, and there's too much going on.
Yeah, they kind of cut themselves short on that. I felt like if they continued on with, like, I don't know, 6 seasons, I think I think the Hex Tech one would have been phenomenal for season 3 or season 4. So
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's there, right? The story and the ideas I think are there. You just can't do it in the 9 episodes, and they just focused on the one.
the problem here is the fact that they talked about the Hex Corp, but they didn't do, in my opinion, they really didn't do enough to kind of elicit our interest as to what is going on with the Hex Corp.
Yes.
Is there anything off about it that we need to be concerned about? They just said, "Here's the Hex Corp. It does its thing. It powers the city, and that's it." So for them to start saying, "Oh yeah, there's something wrong with it," and then to go into that whole storyline, I felt like it was a bit heavy-handed, really.
Yes. Yeah, there was an opportunity there to do something different, and they combined or want to combine just frankly too much. You just can't do it with that. So I I enjoyed seeing these characters again, and I enjoy this. And I guess I'll give my final score for it. Um, I have a feeling from the way we've talked about this, and we haven't really talked about this before today. So I just want to throw that out there to everyone listening. Like we don't like go through we did have some big discussion about this prior. But I'm getting the feeling that you dislike this more than me. I'm gonna give this, I would say, a 3.8 out of 5. I think that everything I talked about with the music, the animation, the fight sequences, I think all that's still super top notch. Um, and I feel like the weakest thing to me was they just had all these story beats that they just didn't give enough time to flesh out. I think some of the character motivations were kind of over the map, which is really unfortunate. But I still think there was something I still enjoyed with this season. I only wish that they had more time to do more with it than what we got. So I'm going to give it a 3.8 out of 5, but I think I'm going to regret that and I might change my score. But I want to hear your final thoughts.
So I had a writer, screenwriter Rodney Stringfellow on last season, and we were talking about the difference between character and plot-driven storylines. Now, what I really, really like about that discussion is that we went over the fact that neither one really is, superior over the other. But with character-driven plots or character-driven storylines, the plot is secondary. It's more about building a connection with the characters in the story and seeing how we react and caring about the way that they react. And I feel like with season 1 of Arcane, that's what we got. We got a character-driven storyline. We really didn't care too much about what was happening. We just wanted to know what Vi and Jinx were thinking and how they would react to a situation like that. And the story was very simple. Like, we didn't have to put too much thought into it because we were focused on what these characters were doing. Now with season 2, it's very much plot driven. I mean, there are so many storylines, running parallel to each other that you lose track of them. And to be honest with you, I kind of lost track by episode 7. At that point, I was sort of focusing more on the animation than anything else. And what I find really, really distressing is the fact that they sacrificed the character development that they did so brilliantly in season 1 in favor of plot-driven narratives. And there is a way to pull it off, but you have to do it, very, very well, or else you're gonna, lose the forest from the trees. And that's what happened here, is the fact that, we had so many different storylines going on. We were focused more on what was happening than what the characters were doing, or how they were interacting with one another, or what they were thinking, right? So, as opposed to where in season 1 we cared about how much Vi was trying her best to try to rehabilitate her sister and, bring Powder back to Jinx. Here we were just more concerned with the fact that Vi was, just going down this long, dark road of being a drug addict and, missing Caitlyn, and apparently she can't hold her own against her own sister in a fist fight. So I feel like everything, all the lessons, all of the triumphs that they had in season 1, I guess over the past 3 years, they seem to have forgotten those lessons, and they were treating it as if it was a brand new show, and it kind of felt like a new show altogether, really. So so for me, it just seems like everything that we hoped for, all the goodwill that we saw in season one, got canceled out by season two, and it's just a huge disappointment, really. It's not. I mean, it's not something that I would definitely go back and watch because there really is nothing to salvage, really. Um, no, I will agree with you. Mbessa was phenomenal. I think she was the driving force, but I don't think she was enough to save it, really. And then you've got Victor. I felt like Victor, the way that Victor was characterized and the way that his character developed, it was really, really unnecessary and uncalled for, really. It would be like taking, you know, much loved superhero like, Clark Kent, Superman, turning him into a crazed villain where all the DC villains and superheroes have to team up and take him down, really, because it's anathema to who he is as a person, as a character. And I feel like Victor is such, to turn Victor into this crazy Ultron-like villain who wants to perfect humanity and ends up wiping, everybody off the map. It's out of character for him. It's not who he is. And I'm even wondering if, if they even understood who these characters were and just forgot all about season one altogether. But for me, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. Just because in terms of story and character development, there was much to be lacking, or much to be wanting, I should say. The only thing that really, really kind of, saved it was the fact that the animation was spot on. I would say it was even better than season one. The soundtrack was phenomenal. The sound design was amazing. I mean, my God, like the way that they would just, switch between, slow-mo animation and regular animation, I thought was phenomenal. Like I'm sitting there taking notes, just saying, all right, so when I go into Blender, like, how do I do this and how do I do that? I wasn't really paying attention to the story because there really was nothing to garner from it. So that's my score, 3 out of 5.
All right.
I know you said you wanted to change it, so I guess for once we can do backsies on this one. If you had
Nope. I'm gonna stay pat. I'm gonna stay pat. I'm gonna stick with what my gut was. Like I said, I still think that there's a lot out there. I'm sure maybe in retrospect I might think about that a little bit differently. So maybe it's just because of I'm just kind of coming off of everything that happened and just trying to sift through everything. It had a lot of misfires. I'm not going to sit there and pretend like it didn't.
Well, I will say this because you were the one who turned me on to Arcane in the first place. Because when it first came out, you talked to Storm about it. You were just, I mean, you wouldn't shut up about it. And we were at our friend's house. I think you made us watch two episodes of it. And then when I came home, I ended up watching the rest of the season. Probably didn't go to bed until 4 that night. So how did you feel about the fact that there's like that what you got in season 2 was different from what you got from season 1?
Oh, I'm definitely not a fan of it, right? So I can't say I like the direction that everyone went. I still think there's some things there that I would say, like for instance, Victor's always looking for a way to cure himself. So like, what would you do if you had a means of doing that, where you were ultimately like the beacon of hope that you can fix, quote unquote, everybody? And like Jace kind of looks at it like, there was nothing to fix, right? You were fine the way you were, right? And I know that's kind of a cliche way of looking at things, but like I still kind of got that feeling. However, right, I still disagree that it was not a needed thing to have like everything billow up like that. I would have liked it to be exactly the way you suggested, which was I wanted to see more of the conflict between Piltover and Zahn and just kind of go for with that. Like to me, that was where the bread and butter was, and that's where my interest was. So it's unfortunate that took second fiddle to everything else was going on, because those two characters, Victor and Jace, ultimately took the stage. But I still think there's things in there that I enjoyed what they were wanting to do with it. It just didn't execute in the way I think it needed to be executed. And that was my biggest gripe with it. Was I felt like I knew where they wanted things to end. It just, unfortunately, the journey there was lackluster. And it's unfortunate because I would say like easily the first season's probably one of the best things I've seen in quite some time. It's definitely up there as far as like my favorite shows. I would watch it again. And you know what? I'd probably watch the second season as well, but I think it'll always kind of have that bitter taste in my mouth that this is a season that could have done a lot more. Right? I don't want to compare it to Game of Thrones like season 8 because I just feel like that's overdone at this stage. But it absolutely was a show where it needed and should have got more time. I'm sure that there's been stuff out there as far as why they felt like they didn't want to do that. But I feel like it was a huge missed opportunity because they definitely could have pulled off the story they wanted to. They just couldn't do it enough.
I think in this case it wasn't a question of more time; it was a question of more seasons. And I think you.
I'm sorry.
You hinted at
more, yes.
You hinted at that earlier, and I felt like, and I feel like that 3-year gap between seasons 1 and 2. I would say that's normal at this point in terms of TV production, but I feel like they could have if they at least done like 4 seasons,
absolutely
that would have made things a whole lot easier. I'll even go on a limb and say even if they did 3 seasons, right? Then the 3rd season would definitely have been, the one to wrap things up in a nice bow, because then the Piltover and Zahn conflict could have been resolved by the end of season 2. Then you have the threat from Hextech, and that's where you get the ideal society at the end. But
yes,
it is what it is.
It is.
But go ahead and let us know down in the comments below what you think. Do you think season 2 of Arcane was phenomenal, or were you just disappointed as we were? And as always, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.